to have a conversation with Father Altman about an announcement we reported about in our news roundup last week. The Bishop of La Crosse essentially canceling all traditional Latin masses in parish churches in that diocese. Father Altman's name is likely familiar to our viewers. We've reported on his situation in the past. I won't give him a lengthy introduction, but he was before entering the seminary, was actually a practicing lawyer. So unfortunately, you've got two lawyers on this call, so it could be a little dangerous. But he did enter the seminary, was ordained. He has been a priest in the diocese there of La Crosse. He made news. The last time this bishop made news was when he announced the removal, or as we colloquially say, the canceling of Father Altman from his parish there, which Father has been disputing with a canonical case. So thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you.
So you actually sent me a picture from your parish that you used to take care of regularly.
Yes.
And if you don't mind, I was going to just show that picture because...
Please do. Please, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Please show the pictures.
It is. So you had really been promoting more traditional, not only doctrine from your public speaking, but liturgy. And one of the fruits of that I've always noticed when priests promote their more rational, traditional liturgy is more boys are interested in serving. And you're not there anymore. Obviously, this is a different priest, but
yes.
These are the fruits of some of your work. These are, I don't know, you told me the number. I didn't count them up. How many?
21.
21.
21. So this particular Mass, I believe, was December 8th, and the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, Holy Day of Obligation.
Yes. And
this picture really tells it all, because here you have the priest and you have 21 servers there, and there was one traditional Latin Mass in the parish, 3 Novus Ordo Masses every weekend. And so what you're seeing is just one Mass. Look at how many servers there are. There were, I think, 174 people attending the Holy Day of Obligation in the traditional Latin Mass. In the Novus Ordo, which was a combination of 3 possible Masses into one, they had one opportunity to go. I think there was 145-ish right in there. So considerably less than the number of people that were attending in the traditional Latin Mass, and there was maybe a handful of servers. I mean, we're talking 2, 3. That's it. So here you have the fruits, as Jesus said. You can tell them by the fruits. Just a picture's worth 1,000 words. There it is, right there. These are the people Bishop Callahan canceled, kicked out of the diocese. These are the kids, the future priests. Boy, if I get mad, you certainly can understand why.
Understandable, yes, because you're absolutely right. I mean, the saints tell us about 1/3 of children are going to, normally are called to the priesthood. So there should be 1/3 of these young boys who are called to the priesthood. Will they be fostered in that call? Because a call to the priesthood doesn't mean somebody's ordained. The devil will fight it.
Yes.
And they need to be fostered. But so with this traditional Latin Mass, did you start that in the parish, or was that there before you?
Sure. So if we understand what it means to be a father to your family, that's how we live out our fraternity. The parish is our family. So if your child comes to you and asks to be fed, what kind of father won't feed his children? I've been asking that since the start of them closing down the Holy Mass, letting Planned Parenthood stay open, letting the liquor stores stay open, letting 1,000 people in Walmart at a time, and they lock the Catholic churches. What kind of father won't feed his family? That tells you all you need to know about the bishops. Well, so when I was first transferred down to St. James in La Crosse, a group of people came up to me and said, Father, we're like orphans because we are inspired, we live our faith through the traditional Latin Mass. Would you be willing to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass? And up to that point, I had full appreciation for it. I mean, there was an oratory of the Institute of Christ, the King's Sovereign High Priest. And so I had seen that, had been there, and I fully appreciated it, but I didn't know how to celebrate it. But I thought, okay, you're my kids, you're my family, you're my children. I have to feed you. So there was not even a choice in the matter. I mean, I couldn't say, how could you say no? So that's when but I didn't know what I was getting myself into, because it's, whereas in seminary, they gave us 6 weeks of self-study, 8 weeks of self-study at the end of 6 years to try and learn the Novus Ordo Mass. That's how easy it is. It took me about 18 months before I was fully, completely comfortable without cheat sheets into presenting to these people sacred worship. Because everything we do in the Latin Mass, the traditional Latin Mass, I call it mini homilies to the people out there that, yes, I believe what's going on up there at the altar. So it was rigorous. We were having practices 3-4 hours sometimes at night in learning to do this. So it was we started the first week of Advent 2017. And ever since then, the parish has grown. Specifically second choir, so that there would be high masses every Sunday and every great big feast day, like Immaculate Conception. It's just blossomed. It's like that one movie, you know this, if you build it, they will come.
Yes.
And indeed they did. And I was getting, if I recall this correctly, something like 2/3 of the baptisms were coming from this group of people. The large families. If you go by a Catholic church and you see big family bands outside, 9 times out of 10 you're going to see a traditional Latin Mass going on in the inside. I mean, that's just the way it is. So I started fostering them, being a parent, being a father to them, and it just grew. It was a profound, and listen, this is something else. Here's what Catholics do in the Novus Ordo. They go to Mass, clock in, check out, and then they go home or they go off to whatever they're doing, if they even bother to show up, because as you know, 80% of Catholics don't even go to Mass anymore in the Novus Ordo.
Yes. And I think it's gotten worse since the COVID closures.
Yes.
And that's people just think, well, we didn't go for 2 years. Why
exactly.
do we go now?
Exactly. What did the bishops teach them, right? Yes. So, but this group, they got the last Mass of the day. They got the leftovers. They would have preferred an earlier in the morning Mass, but it was already taken up by the Novus Ordo. So they had to settle for the last Mass. It was, I think we started at 11:30, or in my time, about 11:35. I was never on time. And then afterward, though, they all gathered every single weekend down in the church hall, and they would have fellowship. See, because our sacred worship is all about worship. It's not about fellowship. It's not Protestant fellowship. It's sacred worship. We have 167 other hours of the week to have fellowship. But what these people would do is they would gather. The kids would be outside playing. It was a sight to behold. It is as I always understood Catholic families, Catholic parishes were supposed to be. They're supposed to be a parish family. And these people lived it out better than I've ever seen in my entire life at any Novus Ordo Mass, ever. And I'm kind of old. I just turned 64. So I've seen a lot of Novus Ordo Masses in my day. I have never, ever seen anything like this group of faithful Catholics at St. James. Never. I've never seen anything of it. Never. I can't stress that enough.
Well, and as we've said and as reported, now they are canceled by the Most Reverend William P. Callahan, who is the bishop. He's the successor of Cardinal Burke, who led this diocese many years ago and was responsible really for introducing traditional masses there and supporting them before he went on to other places. But so this is the response. So tell us about what he's done. What is your understanding of the official decree?
So I think personally he misled the people back in I think it was like August, September, saying, well, this new apostate document from Jorge Bergoglio tried to crush the Latin Mass, that he was going to try to work with it and maybe sort of limit it, certainly its expansion, which in and of itself, when you read Summorum Pontificum, when you read the Council of Trent and St. Pius V, when you read that, you know that there's nothing that any bishop, any pope, any cardinal can do. The people are entitled by dogmatic truth to this Latin Mass. So Traditionis Custodes, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is apostate document. Jorge Bergoglio had no right to issue it. So anyway, so the people thought, okay, he probably isn't going to let other pastors, other churches, parishes in the diocese expand into the traditional Latin Mass, despite its growing desire. But then all of a sudden, I think it was in December, he came out with a new instruction, and he essentially, in fact, canceled every single. There are 158 parishes in the diocese right now. I think it used to be 163. They closed a couple, joined them together. He canceled every single parish in the diocese as of January 1st, not allowed to celebrate the traditional Latin Mass ever again in the parish churches. So he essentially took all these people for whom he is responsible for their eternal souls. He took away their right to worship that is thousands of years old. He stole from them their right to which they are entitled, dogmatic truth entitled to. He, through his little fiat, threw it out. So there's not a single parish church now that can have the traditional Latin Mass in the Diocese of La Crosse. By the way, he's not the only one. All these vipers, these monsters and miters across the United States, across the world, are falling in lockstep behind that apostate prancing around in white in Rome. How can you, like I said, what kind of father won't feed his children? What kind of bishop will kick those most faithful of all Catholics to the curb? What kind of bishop would do that? Well, we know. We see it in real life. He's done that. Now, here's something important to understand why Bergoglio couldn't do what he trying to do, and why bishop anywhere can't do it, is when Pope Benedict XVI came out with his Summorum Pontificum, he wasn't giving us something we didn't already have. And he wasn't giving us something that the next pope could just take away. And then after Bergoglio, the next one could give it back, and then the next one could take it away again. No, that's not the way the deposit of faith works in the Catholic Church. No. What Benedict XVI said in his document was, these people are entitled to the Latin Mass, and you bishops that have been denying them that access to it are in error. That's the essence of the document. These people, if they're there, they are entitled to it, and you must give it to them. Because up until that point, since post-Vatican II and the apostasy in the sacred liturgy that took place after that, until Benedict came out with this document, there was a denial to people of their entitlement, their right, their Catholic faith dogmatic right to the Latin Mass. So Benedict just simply said, bishops, quit screwing those people over. That's kind of a way to put it. And so now what Bergoglio has done is try to go, in the Latin we call it ultra vires, in the law. He's gone outside the scope of his authority. He has no right, no authority, zero, to do what he did in that Traditionis Custodes. He has zero right. And he's undermined the papacy. That's a good word for it. He's undermined it. He's brought disrepute upon the papacy by his acting ultra vires. And this in so many ways. I mean, we know, the Pachamama, Luther on the Vatican stamp. We could go down the list. Catholics, quit breeding like rabbits. You're not supposed to reproduce like that. What did he say? He said, I'm a communist because Jesus was a communist. I mean, this guy, every day he opens his mouth. He brings disrepute and disrespect to the office of St. Peter's papacy, right? He's destroying he's destroying the one Holy Catholic and Apostolic Church with his apostasy. So he had no right to do what he did. He's acting ultra vires outside the scope of his authority, and we do not need to obey that. And yet you get these bishops like Callahan, now say, I've got to be obedient. They have a false sense of obedience. They are obedient. What did St. Peter tell us? We must obey God rather than men.
No, it is Bishop Callahan. I've seen his statements, and others are just saying, I'm just following orders. Right? I'm just doing what I'm told, which is not an excuse if what you're told is contrary to justice and contrary to God's law. But we've been it's interesting. Catholics, I think, we're kind of acculturated to that because they had for many years really good popes. We were fortunate with kind of a good run of popes.
Yeah, I said that way too. Yeah,
good bishops, and just kind of got used to, well, we don't really need to think, we can just do this. But it's almost that the devil pounced on that and saw, this is the way to get people to do this.
Yes. People have a false sense of the word obedience. Peter Kuznetsky, and I know I'm not pronouncing his name correctly, but it's close. He's a hero of mine. He wrote a book, True Obedience. It's a very short book. Every faithful Catholic should read it because it explains to us how we don't have to obey unjust or un-Catholic orders. You know, this whole, I have to obey. Who else had to obey? All the people under Hitler, right? All the people under Stalin, all the people under Mao. They had to obey or they would die, right? Yes. And in obeying, they committed the most heinous possible crimes. But what did Jesus teach us? He said, don't worry about the body. Worry about your eternal soul. And so what Jorge Bergoglio, his filthy cardinals that he's collected all around him, and these bishops are endangering eternal souls. All the more reason why we don't have to obey their unjust, un-Catholic, anti-dogmatic, schismatic, apostate rules and orders.
Wow. So what advice would you give to the faithful in the diocese there who are affected by this? What should they do?
Well, I've learned from personal experience that bishops don't really read your letters.
Yes.
You know, they don't read your emails. They couldn't care less. They don't give a damn about you people. If they did, they would never have locked you out of the churches. If that isn't tell you, I don't know what is it going to take. I think we're up to $8 billion in payouts for these cover-up artists that are still covering up for those who covered up. And that's a fact. To this day, they're still covering up for those who've covered up. So if that doesn't awaken us to the corruption, the rot in the hierarchy, I don't know what does. What's it going to take? At what point is there's going to be a straw that breaks the camel's back, right? So what can people do? Well, there's one thing that bishops can't stand. I've learned this again. I thank you, Lord, for putting me through this crazy time because you're teaching me and I can teach others. So they're not going to listen to cards, letters. They won't even listen to phone calls because they don't take them. They go into a machine, and some secretary sometimes has to listen to them, but they don't care. Here's what they do care about, though. It isn't even money, right? Because they can close churches and sell them off, and they're going to live high on the hog until the day they die. They're setting up the future for the bishops who have to take over a failed diocese. As the current crop of bishops manage it in decline. That's all they're doing now. They're just managing the decline, closing parishes, selling them off, keeping their, nest feathered. Here's what they can't stand. They can't stand bad publicity. That is the one thing that drives them crazy. So open protests, right, in front of cathedrals would be one way to attract their unwanted attention from the press. Listen, the press should eat it up because the press hates the Catholic Church too.
Yes.
So
any controversy they love.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh yeah. So it doesn't matter that there are 1 million new victims of childhood sexual abuse every year in this country. You don't hear that in the press. But God forbid you dig up something from 50 years ago in Pittsburgh. That's going to be the front page news, right? They'll do anything to attack the Catholic Church, including what they see as this schism. But there is a de facto, people need to understand this, there is a de facto schism in the church already, and it's not us, TLM people, who have schismed away. No, it's Bergoglio and his boys who have schismed away from the deposit of faith. Because in the end, this is what you must obey, the deposit of faith, handed down to us from the apostles, unchanged, unchangeable for 2,000 years. You must obey God rather than men. So, it is Bergoglio who is schismed from the Catholic Church. And I don't know what more evidence do you need to show you? Just the Pachamama, that in and of itself. You have brought the abomination into the temple. And listen, throughout salvation history, you bring an abomination into the temple, cataclysm comes. I'm just waiting. So here's what you do. You do what I'd call public protests. Because that will attract the news, and that's the one thing that bishops can't stand. Is they are so people who are prideful right? They can't stand anything that is an affront to their pride. And the bishops today, here's something to help people understand this, because most people don't even, they're off busy living their own lives. They don't know that in Jesus' day, 96% of the Sanhedrin crucified him. There were only two good ones, right? Nicodemus, who came in the middle of the night, and Gamaliel, who stood up for Peter and John when they were arrested for the second time in the temple. Only two. That meant 68 out of 70, either directly or through their silence, which is complicity, crucified Jesus. That's 96%. Of the people who saw Jesus work miracles right before their very eyes, right? I mean, they saw that paralytic come down through the hole in the roof. They knew that he had raised Lazarus from the dead. The Sanhedrin knew this because they were trying to they plotted to kill Lazarus to destroy the evidence. 96% of those people who looked upon Jesus' face still crucified him. Why are we so deluded as to think that the percentage of good bishops in our day is any better than it was than those who saw Jesus himself? That makes no sense. People need to wake up and understand that these are the same ones as then who widen their phylacteries, who want to sit at the head of the table, who want all this public recognition, right? So the one thing that people of pride can't stand is an affront to their pride. Do you know, can I say one more thing? Do you have time?
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
All right. So, because this relates to this. And so when Jorge Bergoglio took over the papacy, and listen, people out there, I know that's not the way you pronounce his name. But when Jorge Bergoglio took over the papacy, he personally instituted a new canon in canon law, a new rule that says something to the fact that if you, meaning like people like me, somehow shame them or get people to think less of them, well, then that's grounds for us to punish you in all the various ways they can try to punish you, like excommunication, like laicization, right? So first, he makes a new canon law saying, if you do anything, I'm going to crush you like a bug. And if you say anything, and then he goes out and he does things like the Pachamama, like Luther on the Vatican stamp, like having Judas in his office, right? There's a statue, I guess, and there's a picture where Jesus comes and forgives Judas after Jesus rose from the dead, and therefore Judas is now in heaven, which of course that's not true. That's not what Jesus taught, right? But that's what he's got on his desk. That's absolute apostasy.
But it's almost like he's baiting people to break this law that he adopted.
And right, exactly. So what kind of tyrant, what kind of dictator will make a rule saying, if you say anything against me, I'm going to crush you like a bug, and then goes out and does everything he's not supposed to do, and yet you can't say anything or else he's going to crush you. And that's the problem. You see, I won't say who it was, but a high-ranking prelate in the church once said to me that you're going to feel very alone, Father, because even your friends who agree with you in private will not be seen with you in public. That's the same as like Nicodemus, right? Yes. He came to agree with Jesus, right? But he did it in the middle of the night because he knew the other guys would throw him out. Yes. So I can tell you from personal experience, again, it's thank you, Lord, for all this personal experience that I'm going through, because it helps me to understand clearly what I knew and can teach others. A lot of my friends, closest friends, agree 100% with me, but will say absolutely nothing. They will go along with, they'll grouse, right? I get sick of listening to the grouse. Listen, if you're complaining, why don't you say anything? Why just leave me here all twisting in the wind, right? But they won't say anything because they know full well that these monsters and miters will cancel them. And I have to tell you, when I was canceled, I had no idea the number. I thought there's maybe one or two others around the country. Who knew? It's upwards of like 2,000. I'm sitting right now. I'm not in my normal, typical meditation room where you would see me on interviews. I'm sitting out in a B&B. I think it's my first B&B I've ever been. But I'm with canceled priests. There's something like 2,000 of them. And there's a bunch of us have gathered together for fraternity. Out here there's been some events this week. I haven't made it to any of them because I couldn't get away. But there's an event Wednesday night that I guess I'm speaking at. So they're off celebrating the Holy Mass right now. And so that's why I'm alone here in this house. They might come marching in, and if you hear any commotion, that's what you're hearing. Canceled priests. I found out there's like 2,000 priests, roughly. Now watch, each one of us costs the diocese, costs the people of the diocese. Because it's not the diocese, it's the people. That $8 billion in payouts, that's your money, people. When are you going to start complaining about the way the bishops have squandered your money by their filthy, unlawful, godless, and damned cover-up of boy rapers? I mean, that's what it is. Let's go calling it, child sexual abuse. Let's call it raping boys, right? Because that's what it was, and that's what they covered up, and that's what they fostered by transferring a raper to another parish. And yet these people are still in positions of power. Well, anyway, that's where I am right now with these canceled priests. I didn't know there were this many. And so that represents about $250,000 of seminary education that you people have paid for. But forget about temporal things, as staggering as that number is. This represents a whole bunch of priests who have been taken out of ministering to the people, right?
Yes.
Yes. And that means ministering to your eternal soul. I can tell you this, people, listen closely. You know the priests who love you because they're the ones that fed you during this madness of COVID lockdown, that these bishops just caved to the government. They're in bed with the government, sometimes literally. So you know the priests that fed you, that did everything they could within the rules that they were burdened with to make sure that you received the sacrament of confession for your eternal soul, so that you were in a state of grace should God call you home. They brought you Holy Communion, the bread of life, the real presence of Jesus Christ in the Holy Eucharist, without which you do not have life within you. Right? That's not me talking, that's Jesus, right? They brought you the sacraments in your time of need. I think I hear someone coming in right now. So that's how you know. I can, if there's a lot of them, I can always go into another room. But that's how you know that they loved you. They took care of you in your time of need. So go support them.
Yeah, absolutely. If we could pick up on that, because we talked about what can the laity do. Well, it's to your brother priests. What can they do? And share briefly the story in France in the 1970s. When again priests were being canceled, the mass they attempted to cancel. And there's a church in Paris, Saint Nicolas de Chardonnay, and here's a picture of it now. Beautiful.
Oh,
church.
nice.
And the priests got together and just went in and started saying mass and didn't stop. They just did all night, all day. They had a rotation of priests. Yeah. And I know actually a French priest who's a priest now, who was an 11-year-old boy, who was volunteered to be an altar server. So he went in with some of the other boys and just lived in the church, serving mass after mass after mass. And,
wow.
They just occupied the church and said,
yes,
the people are entitled to this. So again, may have to go to that extreme, but priests just, as Father said, this is not a valid law because it's against the law of God. Just the best reaction, just offer the mass and fear him who can cast you into hell rather than you take away your pension, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. And again, I think that's a great point for the laity too. If priests do that, we do need to be there to support what you're doing, to help, because these priests will get canceled if they do that. But be there to support you, to provide so that you can continue, notwithstanding being canceled, to be there as a model. So Father and I actually will both be mentioned a speech, but we will both be in Chicago in June, the end of June. The Coalition for Canceled Priests will be having a conference, and I think we're both scheduled to be there. So if you're interested, if you've enjoyed hearing Father today, take a look at that, definitely on their Coalition for Canceled Priests website. I don't know if you know what you're talking about in June, what your topic will be.
I don't know what I'm talking about Wednesday. So I'm sure something will be inspired within me, because you always pray first. Right?
Yes.
Help me, Lord. Let me say what you want me to say. You always pray. We'll see. I have no idea about Wednesday. Or about June. That's so far on the distant horizon.
Well, good. Well, thank you for sharing your perspective. Again, we had a lot of interest when we covered this story last week, and since you have a special connection to this diocese,